Hey gang, Scott Detweiler here. We're going to do a live stream today talking about Capture One versus Lightroom. I have some people who would like to know more about that, so we will start here momentarily. Let me get a few people into the room and we'll get going. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of talk a bit here until people start to join in the stream. So I've been a Lightroom user, or had been a Lightroom user since pretty much day one. In fact, I think I still have a box of Lightroom on my shelf unopened from version 2 back when I had more than 2 machines and I wanted to put it on a machine. And I ended up changing my mind, so it's now more of a collector's item than anything else. So I changed to Capture One from Lightroom for quite a few reasons, and people have asked questions about that. So I thought that today I would cover those, kind of in the order of what was important to me about this. Now it's not a perfect product either, so I want to talk about some of the weaknesses that I have found with Capture One and how I kind of get around them. I haven't actually opened Lightroom now for a good 4 or 5 months. The transition time was difficult. The learning curve for Capture One is significant. It is a much more convoluted interface. I'm not going to say it's better because I don't think that it is more powerful, but with power comes complexity, right? So the interface has a lot going on and it's a little bit button happy. However, once you learn where things are and the fact that you can move them around, unlike Lightroom, we can put different things where we want them and be happy about it. So let's just kind of I'm actually waiting for some people to join the stream here, so I'm kind of buying time. As soon as you're in the stream, if you could let me know if the volume is okay, that would be great. I'm assuming that we're good to go here from the feedback that I'm seeing on my monitor. So let's talk about, first of all, the tool set that are available in Capture One being very similar to that in Lightroom. So all the things you can do in Lightroom, you can also do in Capture One, albeit a little bit differently. So some areas are very weak. I'm going to say Capture One is not strong at keywording, for example. Generic keywording, it's fine. But if you're like me, and I use keywording substantially, so when I work on a project, I know who the model was, who the designer was, where the location was. I know everything there is to know about that picture when it was taken. Capture One is not as friendly as Lightroom is for that. Mostly dealing with things like synonyms and some advanced keywording things that Lightroom has that Capture One doesn't have yet. But I'll say that Capture One didn't have keywords in any serious level until recently. So I look at that as a area of growth for the product and not an area of critique yet, because it's still kind of shiny. Where Capture One completely destroys Lightroom is in its raw engine. So when we take a picture with our camera, if you're a professional or advanced amateur, you are shooting in RAW. You're not shooting in JPEG. And the main reasons we do that is because the camera makes decisions on how sharp the image is going to be, the saturation of the colors, the different levels of detail that it chooses to bring out. And there's a lot of complicated terms that I'm not going to throw out there. Well, let's just say that there's a lot going on in the raw conversion. It's not just a simple, here's the picture we have. So when you look at a picture that's converted by Capture One and a picture that's been converted by Lightroom, they look very different. Thank you, Kate, for the subscribe, by the way. So, and let me know if my volume is okay here. I'm assuming it is. Feel free to type in the chat any questions you have. This stream is for you guys because you're the ones who ask for it. I'm kind of buying time as people join. So, as I was saying, the raw engine for Capture One is much more powerful. So when you look at the resulting image, that is just the conversion of the raw data, and there is a conversion process that takes place. And all manufacturers have hidden the recipe for what you're supposed to do with that data. So Adobe has to guess, Capture One has to guess, everyone has to guess how that's done, unless you choose to use the tool the manufacturer kicks out. And I think we all know how bad those are. Nikon's is terrible. Sony's I've never actually used. Canon's I hear is awful. So really, you're looking at a raw converter first and foremost as how you get from the raw data to how you get to the picture you're going to work on. And Capture One is by far and away a better tool for that. It's a much more grown-up raw engine. Now, is it to say the one in Lightroom is bad? No, not at all. It's good enough. And for the longest time, the bonuses that were in Capture One were not enough for me to move because the interface was so daunting that I stuck with Lightroom for a really long time until I finally put my foot down and said I'm going to move over. And I'm glad I did. There's a lot of things that Capture One offers that Lightroom just doesn't do, especially when you're in the professional photographer area. If this is what you do for a living, this tool tends to kind of offer more for you. So feel free to type in the chat and let me know if you have any questions as you go. I'm just going to kind of walk through the product a bit and talk about the strengths and weaknesses of it. So if you have any questions, let me know. So first, let's start with the fact that we have, and I assume you guys can hear me. No one has said anything yet, so I'm assuming that the chat is actually able to hear me and I'm not just talking to myself. I'm assuming. Otherwise, that was a terribly interesting demo I just did, and no one heard it. Okay, so let's talk first of all about the organization inside of Capture One. So Capture One has two methods of organization. Unlike Lightroom, Capture One has what we call a session version and a catalog version. So the session version actually reads from the hard drive of your machine. So it works like any other type of, oh, awesome, thank you, Laurie. It works like any other type of disk software. So you see here that I have my trip to the Ohio State Reformatory, or the Shawshank Prison as it's known, and I have some folders underneath here. And I have my Capture folder and my Selects folder. And this is the way that Capture One has always worked as far as I remember. It will also add another folder called your Output folder, which I don't tend to use. So it is actually reading from the hard drive. So if I make changes in Lightroom, for example, and then come back to Capture One, I can ask it to resynchronize this, or if I just relaunch the product or change folders and come back, however you do it, it will find all your new folders and files and show them to you. So it is a live, non-catalog based method of reading your images. Now that's pretty powerful, especially if you're working in a team and you have people who are working on different images and you're all dumping them into the same shared hard drive. That's pretty cool. You don't have the problem that Lightroom does, is that you have a catalog that is just a catalog. It can't be shared. It doesn't like network drives. It's a single user entity, at least right now. This frees that up. Now, with that comes all additional problems or issues or concerns, meaning that each session is an island unto itself. So I can look up here at my most recent sessions, and I can change to any of these other sessions that I have. And that's fine, but let's say I'm behind on a bunch of projects and I've marked all the images I want. I make them red is how I do it. I want to see what those are without hopping around from session to session. That's where a catalog would be pretty cool. So you can do a catalog inside of Capture One as well, and a catalog can, again, read from the hard drive, but it's not going to refresh itself unless it's requested to re-ingest images. So it works very much like the Lightroom catalog. The images can stay on the hard drive where they are, so you can just include them in the library virtually, or you can have it actually suck the images up into the catalog. And to tell you the truth, I've never done that. Things like that scare me, so I don't really care to use that type of thing. So the sessions are pretty cool. Now, this folder structure initially seems a little annoying, and this is the thing that kind of scared me away from it initially. And you don't have to live with this, by the way. If you're like me originally and you had a Lightroom, just dumps everything into the date folder, and I renamed the date folder with the name of the event so I don't forget what it is, and I'm never going to remember. then I just dump the images in here, and there's a capture folder. That's where all the files live. They live in the capture folder. Hi, Larry. And then what I do is I take the images that are the best images. So these are my 5-star images from my day at the event. And by the way, it is a very fast rendering software. It really beats the pants off of Lightroom in most cases. And there's some pretty cool things that it does too. Aside from just looking at this view of things, you have your loop view. So if you're looking at let's say different images and you want to go zoom in on one, you can actually just use your loop right here from the thumbnail to see if you got focus on what it is that you want to focus on. And you don't have to, bring the image up and look at it for focus. So this is pretty cool. Like, I can quickly determine whether or not this is an image I choose to work with just based on the loop tool. And you just hover over the thumbnail as I showed. So quick and easy way to determine whether something's in focus instead of loading it in, waiting for it to catch up, and then looking at the image. And Lightroom was notoriously slow for that. It's probably gotten a little bit better because I know they were focused on performance in the last 3 to 4 months. But to me, this is just worlds faster. And you can see I use colors a lot. Purple are finished images. Red are images yet to do. And 5-star images, you see these are all 5-star images. These are all images I think that have potential for me to eventually release them. And some of these you're seeing, and no one has ever seen these before, so I'm sharing here. So what I did is I moved those into the selects folder, so they're separate from the capture folder. So the capture folder is stuff that was good, but it really didn't make the best example of my day. My best day are these selects. So I go through the capture folder, rate them 5 stars, and then you select them all, and there's actually a nice little shortcut up here to move all the selected variants into your selects folder. So you're supposed to do it this way. Now, why? Why would you do this? And for the longest time, I was like, why add this extra step now of my images are in 2 different folders from the exact same day? What is the benefit of this? And I did not understand why I should do this. Now, I do. And it is because I'm approaching 16 terabytes of stored images right now. And I'm having issues managing those files. Where do I put all those files? Well, at the end of the day, the selects are really what I need to keep. The capture stuff was fine, but there was either it's out of focus, which you destroy it, obviously. Maybe it's not the best pose, and there's a little bit better pose, so that one is select. So the inferior images, they're not trash, but the inferior images are still in the capture folder. So when I'm archiving, the capture folder is the first thing to come off the hard drive and be stored offline. It's my cold storage. I don't care so much about it. So now in a whole day of shooting all these models, I ended up with 197 selects that these are my core images now. And that's a much smaller footprint than the 800 or 900, maybe perhaps, that I shot the entire day. So 15 to 20% of my images turn out to be ones that I want to keep on a good day. And that works for me. So now I can actually remove those images, the capture folder's images, from the hard drive and store them. And now I'm dealing with a much smaller footprint that I can actually keep active for many years until I run into a situation where I have to start removing them. Like 2015 now is starting to go all to cold storage because I'm done with those images. Clients are done purchasing them. I haven't had to touch them for a while. So now even the selects folders are coming off and everything is being archived. So I kind of like this now. Now there is one other folder that it tends to create, and it's called the output folder, and that was where your output would be your Photoshop documents. So if you run a RAW into Photoshop, it is then put in the output folder for you. So I haven't really embraced that one yet. I still like the TIFF to be in the same folder as the original RAW, but that's just me, and I'm sure at some point I'll have to come to embrace the fact that those are very large files. They're 2 gig plus usually. And maybe now I just want to keep those around in case someone requests, like a magazine says we'd like to do a shot of that. We need an export at a certain size at 300 pixels per inch. I need to generate that for them. And I keep a file or a folder of my printables available, but sometimes a special request is needed size-wise. Then I have to go back and I have to find the output and so on. So maybe I just keep the outputs around because there's not as many of those. And these raws are gone. Now my blue ones, how I do it is my blue ones are files that have a grown-up equivalent. They have the completed images. So if I look at this one, this 9305 here, I can go to the very bottom because it sorts them by name. That's the method I have right now. And here's 9305 in its finished state. So this is just how I organize my stuff, and how Capture One is really asking you to separate your stuff into folders. Now, the catalog version of this doesn't do that. The catalog version works like a catalog, and I'm not going to show you the catalog version because I don't use the catalog version. I've embraced this session version, and there's a couple of other benefits to session. Larry, who joined the channel here, Larry and I shot a dog show, or not a dog show, I guess it is a show, where they had to do obstacles. And we shot 12 or 15,000 pictures in a day between the two of us. It's nuts. And what's really cool about this is you see this little icon here says this is my capture folder. At any time, I can change and choose a new folder as my capture folder. So as different dogs are running or different measurements like the 22-inch jump, all the ones in the 22-inch jump would come out. I can then highlight that and say, create a new directory called 22-inch jump, mark as my capture folder, and I'll start taking pictures and it'll dump them into that capture folder. So when you're on bigger projects and you have many different scenes, many different models, or many different products, you create a separate folder for it. All you have to do is come in here, right click, and say set as my capture folder. And boom, now all your pictures will be dumped into that one. So really easy way, you have the dog trials, that's right. It's a really easy way to organize as you're shooting instead of later on when you have a huge number of pictures. Let's say if you're a wedding photographer, you wouldn't shoot tethered, for example, where, well, I guess you could if you set up a wireless router and did all kinds of other convolutions, but I'm not going to go into that. But basically, I love the fact that I can change my capture folder on the fly. I can do that with my selects folder. I can also do it with my trash folder. So my trash folder is shared amongst all my sessions. I just have one that I use for everything. And it's just down here. It's under trash. And I just keep it back over here under the Capture One folder. So I know where that is. It's always in the same place. And it's very easy for me to dump all my trash, my autofocus shots, something where the flash didn't fire perhaps, or whatever. Junk I don't want anymore. I just throw it in there and I'm done. So I like this. I've embraced this. I've gotten away from the catalog. The catalog was cool originally, but if you've used Lightroom for a long time, you know that it starts to get slow. If you're shooting, 10 to 12,000 to 15,000 pictures, now your catalog is starting to be just running like a dog, and you don't need that on top of it. So each session being its own island helped me a lot with efficiency. This thing loads, and it loads fast. Yes, I do have to hop around depending on what I want to work on, but I've got them all here by either folder, or I have all my Capture One sessions I can do up here. So that's the library. There's down here you've got all your star ratings and your colors. There's more color tags than there are in Lightroom, which I love the color tags, so I use those a lot for different states of completeness. Also other special projects, and then of course by date, and then any keywords and so on, and whether or not it's been processed. And this is kind of a cool one as to whether or not you've actually run it through some sort of process, or if it's just generic. I'd say one of the biggest down points to Capture One is that not a lot of people have embraced it for plugins and filters and all that other stuff that a lot of people, when they first start out, they're like, my brand is I'm Gatsby number 83. That is me. You can't really do that in Lightroom yet. A lot of those are not available. However, there are packs that are coming out now, and you can always make your own just like you could before, but a lot of people don't. They just go find something that they buy, regularly $49,000 is now $18, and you get more things than you'll ever be able to look at. I just create the one that I want and store it myself. There are a lot of ways that Capture One deals with images faster and in larger bulk, and that's what some of these controls appear for. So this is allowing me to work on all my images that are selected at once, or one image at a time. So if I have a selected variant and I want the settings from this one, I can just click the up arrow here and it stores those adjustments. I can click a new variant and then download those adjustments. I use that a lot. You can quickly make a lot of photos look the same. And I'll talk a bit about color management in a minute, because color is really one of the big deals for this. But anyway, so there's a lot of really nice features for managing your library in here. Uh, and they've been doing it longer than Lightroom. Keep that in mind. This is a tool that has been around longer than Lightroom has existed. It was not popular because it really kind of rested only with the phase one, and if you didn't have a phase one or a large medium format camera like that, this was unavailable to you. So they just kind of worked their way into the more professional prosumer market in the last few years. Okay, so let's move on. By the way, you can move around any icon that you see. You can remove tools from any library. So if I like my clarity slider to be on the library tab, I can add it. You can remove anything you like. You can pop it out and put it on another monitor, rearrange it, and then save your workspace. And that comes with a bunch of workspaces for, let's say, dual monitor. I'm going to use simplified. The tethering in Capture One is amazing. It doesn't screw up. Lightroom, I have difficulty with Lightroom forgetting where my camera is constantly. This doesn't do that. This works like a champion every time. It's so reliable. So I've got different ones. I tend to just kind of use the same one. I used to have a culling and a retouching one, but I just don't need it anymore. I think I've got down to what I want most of the time. All your main tools are stored up here, and again, you can rearrange all this stuff. You can customize by adding or dropping spacers. You've got these spacers in here. You've got all these different kinds of modes that you can use. Again, I've kind of left mine almost as it comes, because I found the tools that are up there are really the tools that I need most of the time. So let's go into another thing. So the camera, I'm not going to talk too much about capture at the moment, but say tethering is awesome, and you can live view from your camera here. So if you shoot product, and I do shoot product from time to time, this is a godsend, because you can look at the monitor, see what you're going to get, and then fire the camera from your keyboard without having to touch the button on the camera, which could potentially add shake, change position, introduce error, and so on. So I love this stuff. It's very, very cool. But I'm not going to talk about that too much today. So let's talk about the lens. So in Lightroom, you have the ability to change your aberration and some keystoning and other things like that. This takes that and kind of adds more ability. So there's lenses, there's all the profiling that you would normally get if you're just shooting pictures. So if I highlight this one, it shows I use my Sony 24-70. I can remove aberration, diffraction correction, distortion, all those kinds of things. Let me find a picture that I can bring up here. Yeah, that's crazy me. I don't know what I'm going to do with this picture yet, but I got ideas. Maybe this one. So the distortion, the sharpness, a light fall off, which is your vignetting around the outside, whether you want vignetting or not. I hate vignetting, so I tend to remove it. Purple fringing, rotations, flipping, doing all this kind of standard stuff that you would do, cropping, keystoning. Now, there's a pretty cool keystoning tool in here that is it's equivalent to what Lightroom has now, but Lightroom didn't used to have it, so that you could pick verticals and horizontals, and it would snap the whole image so that everything is vertical and everything's horizontal. So these are relatively new tools to Lightroom, but they've been here, at least in the first two iterations, for quite a while. Sharpening, overlay is pretty interesting. So in Capture One, I think this kind of catered to the product photographer initially. You can use any image and overlay it over the top of your view. And I don't really have one to show, so I'm not really going to bring one up. But if you're shooting a product, let's say you're shooting a bottle of vodka, and they say this is the shot we're aiming for. They give you an example typically. Even if it's just a sketch, it shows the angle where the product's going to sit. You can load that as an overlay, change its opacity, move it around, and then you can adjust using your live view as you're tethered so that you get everything where you want it to be before you take your picture. So this overlay is pretty powerful. If you want to, you could use this, say, for your guidelines. So say you're doing something more than rule of thirds, you've graduated to beyond that, you can actually load in any type of guide that you would use to help you lay out your photo better. So this is pretty cool. This is a very grown-up tool, especially for product photography. This is a must-have. I mean, I use this every time I shoot product because I always get a spec shot or a previous version, and they want the new version to be on the box the same way. You use this overlay tool. Noise reduction, vignetting, all those kinds of things. But again, there's a lot of other tools in here, and some of these I don't even use. I mean, they're just there to add to this. So you can focus your camera remotely, for example, if you're shooting tethered. So if it's up above, You can shoot down. Yeah, it is amazing for product, and that's really where I live with it. Now, a couple other things in here, but I haven't moved from this tab. I put them in another tab on purpose. By the way, you can see the view over here of how it's been cropped. So you see the overlay of the crop in your thumbnail. I think it's easier to see what's going on that way. That's nice because you know it's been cropped. You don't have to wonder. All right, so let's talk about the next one over is the exposure. And as I go here, you're gonna start to see why this product is so cool to me. First of all, layers. You can have layers in here, and each layer can have its own mask. So let's grab this picture of Victoria here, and I can add a gradient, my G key. I can go and I can add a gradient to this, and you can use your shift key like you can in Lightroom to constrain it. So something like this. So I can go in here and say, well, I want the floor a little bit brighter. It'll use that. Oh, all the emails in the world are coming in at once. I can use that to adjust here. My contrast. I mean, the sliders you're used to seeing for the most part, although the highlight slider works much differently, and we'll talk about that when we get there. The other cool thing about this works with your Wacom tablet, pressure sensitivity. So if you're a person who wants to retouch and use your pressure sensitivity on your tablet in here using a layer because you're a dodge and burn fiend, I know that's how I do things, you could actually do it on the raw data before you even go to Photoshop, or if you don't even need to go to Photoshop. If you're just looking to dodge and burn a bit, you can do that right here with your Wacom tablet. And then you have layer opacity as well. There's a lot of tools available for your layers. You can refine the mask much like you can in Photoshop. You can copy the mask from another layer, so if you want to use the same mask twice. I mean, there's all kinds of cool options for what you're trying to do or how you're working with your mask, but you can have as many layers as you like. There are quite a few tools. There aren't a lot of them. So if you're looking like the circular one that's available, that new round one they have in Lightroom, that isn't in this tool. However, with the brush tool, you can get it as big as you need to get it, and it's got opacity. It has flow. Again, if you are a retoucher and you use your Photoshop for dodging and burn, you put your flow to 0, your opacity to 100%, and then adjust your hardness to whatever you're looking to do, and then dodge and burn like a madman this way with your flow set to 1. This is how I do it myself, whether you want it to be an airbrush, be sensitive to pen pressure, and so on. So I think this is pretty cool. I don't use this to the extent that I probably should, because I'm a person who uses frequency separation quite often, and I can't really do that from in here. But if I'm looking to just kind of dodge and burn some corrections for exposure, or maybe it's after that where I'm looking to kind of contour the model, I will use this tool here. Exposure, your standard exposure tools. I'm not really going to talk about those too much. There are autos here, and by the way, almost everything has presets. So if you're saying you like your exposure a certain way, you can actually save your own preset that works only with exposure. So each tool can have its own set of presets. Dynamic range, your clarity, you could have your own preset for each one of these things. And there's a way to manage those presets into a package. So it's much more powerful than Lightroom in that if I like, say, Gatsby number 82, but I like the exposure from Gatsby number 45, I can just grab that exposure and use it along with the other tool. So you can create and mix and match all your different product tools together. Now, as I said, these work a little bit better. They do work better. This is recovery only. So in Lightroom, if you slide your highlight slider, you're actually trying to add a highlight to the image. This is pulling it back, so you can see that it's working on the window there. It works just as well as Lightroom. I think the recovery has a better range than it does in Lightroom. I think Capture One just does a better job. Shadow recovery, same way as you would see it in Lightroom as well. But you notice here we have our levels view, and this is one of the things that I loved about this product. So I usually keep my levels up near the top, and so you've got some different sliders here. So you have your recovery on the top, like where you want your curve. You're looking at a curve here, and you're going to use it like a curve. And the bottom is where you're applying, your cutoff point for that curve, and this is your gray point. So if you don't want to use this, by the way, that's fine. There's another way to do it, but I'm just showing it. And then you have over here your black point, and then this is your fill point. So if you like a little bit of lift in the blacks, you can do it here as well. And you can set these, and again, keep them as a preset. So every time you arrive here, say this is always a 5, and this is always a 250, because you don't want to blow any of the shadows or highlights if you're printing, for example. I know now there's no true black and there's no true white on this image. So notice I had to select the background image because each one has a separate layer, or a separate level, or a separate curve. So each layer can have its own tool set. Exposure you get, clarity. Now clarity is pretty cool, and I like clarity. I use clarity a lot because you can pop dresses and things. Like if I go down and look at the final version of this image here, although this is the photoshopped version, there are many different versions of clarity on here. So if, for example, I use my brush tool and I go in and I just want to, oops, I gotta change my settings back, full flow here. I just want to brush on her dress. I'm obviously doing a very ham-handed method here. And you see it shows me my mask as I'm drawing, and when I lift it, it goes away. There are 4 different types of clarity depending on what you're trying to do with it. So just a regular natural, more of a punch, which is pretty obnoxious typically, a natural, and then there's the classic, which is the one that you use in Lightroom. So I tend to prefer the natural or the punch, but I may use punch at less oomph. So I just like the way that I have more options for clarity. Clarity is micro contrast. Think of it like that. It's contrast on a much smaller level. So popping details in small things, like this brick or this stonework here with the flaking paint would benefit greatly from the clarity tool. Where a flat wall or something like that, I like it in hair, for example. I use this a lot, but you can go overboard with it too, so you got to be careful. And then structure is like micro sharpening, so you can pop, and if you can see that or not. But sharpening, it's kind of like sharpening, but not. It's like almost sharpening. Again, you can go too far with it. I think this is very similar to, if you're familiar with the Instagram structure tool, that you're basically doing the exact same thing, but you can operate on a layer with it. I wouldn't use it on an entire image. That's what sharpening is for. But in areas where, say, I need a little bit more pop, eyes maybe, or hair, add a little bit of structure to it, is a nice touch. And then, of course, you have your curves. So curve, you have your presets for curves, and then you have all your luminosity only, your red, green, and your blue curve, and then the RGB. So I love the fact I have a luminosity only curve. So I can curve the whole image, exactly how I want it to look, using the curves here. And again, it's per layer. So this layer here we had on her dress, I can come back and say I just want the dress in that column. I can add a little bit different kind of a curve to that if I choose to. So pretty cool. This layers thing is a big differentiator for me from Lightroom. When you've got just one for everything and that's all you get. You can use brushes, yes, and so on, but I like the fact that I can adjust the opacity layer on, and also I can change colors and so on. Each of these layers is available to each tool as well. So let's talk about the color editor, which is probably the most awesome part of this entire product. There was one other thing in here. I must have taken it off mine. I'll find it in here at some point. Oh, it's right here. So base characteristics. So if you don't know, when you take a picture with your camera and it stores it as raw, it shows you the preview in the back of the camera. That has a curve applied to it, so you as a human can look at it and find it pleasing to the eye. So there's a curve applied by your camera for JPEG, and that's one of the reasons why we don't like to shoot JPEG, because it's making a decision on a contrast curve. But in order for us to look at it, we want to know what that looks like. If you get more into film, you find out that that is not something that we tend to use. We want, I'm resetting this, by the way. That's what this giant button up here is. This resets everything back to the way that it was. I'm sorry, I'm losing track of where I'm going here. When you're using film, you tend to want to avoid any curve. You want as flat as possible. So you can actually go back and get the linear response curve. Now there isn't going to be one for this one. Let's find you on this image here. Back and get our linear response curve. These are all pictures I've worked on. I'm sorry, I'm looking for purple ones. I need to find one that's not purple. Choose this one. I have an extra shadow here. There's an extra shadow, linear response. So the linear response looks pretty boring. I use the extra shadow one for the most part. Auto is fine. But this linear response allows you to kind of look at the image the way that it was originally taken without the curve applied to it. So you're starting from scratch. And I use this from time to time on images that I'm having issues with. It's like, it's just, I've lost detail somewhere. Well, that curve that was applied by the camera may be the problem. So if I go back to my linear response, I might be able to get that shadow or that highlight that maybe I was missing, and without having to play with sliders, and then I can apply my own curve to it. Find a different image to work on here. I was going to pick some images for today, and then I thought I'm just going to kind of wing it, because why not? So you'll see that I use this extra shadow, and by the way, it's set to my default, and you can default each one to the serial number of the camera. So if you're shooting with multiple cameras, you can say, whenever I shoot with the serial number, this is how this has to be tweaked, because this is what I'm going to prefer. All right, so that's base characteristics, and this is pretty interesting. All right, so white balance, we all have white balance. There's nothing there to talk about. This one is really cool. This is normalized. So this allows you to take any color and then put it on another picture and say, this is the same color as that. And it will fix the picture so that those two items are the same color. Well, it's not white balance. It might be red balance. It might be blue balance. It might be some other sort of balance. So you can pick anything you want in this picture and then apply it in that picture. So very cool. Say we pick the color of this let's just pick her skin here, because this is going to be complicated otherwise. If she had an interesting dress on, and I can go in here and I can say this, I want to normalize this color, it will shift this image to look like the other image. So that's pretty cool, especially if you have a lot of things you're trying to match and white balances and cutting it. I do use normalize from time to time, but I tend to also shoot a gray card, so or even use my X-Rite. So I don't really use this that much, but it's a pretty cool tool to have. And you can also base it on exposure or just the white balance of that object. Okay, so now let's get to the big one, the color balance. This is the reason most people change to Capture One. Aside from the fact the raw processing engine is amazing, you're going to get a better, sharper, more interesting picture out of the raw process. So just know that going into it. You're going to start with a better picture. Then you want to play with the colors. So there are a couple colors in here that are amazing. I have the normalize tool on here twice. And you can do that too. You can add as many of the same tool as you would like. For instance, if I want to have a shadow version of my color balance tool, but I also want to have a version of my color balance tool that is just the highlight, now I can have both. And move them around and whatever. So you can have, and move them to another monitor, whatever you'd like. I just use it like this. So you have the three-way, shadow, midtone, highlight, or the master. So I use it this way. So shadow, I tend to like my shadows a little on the blue side. That's just how I do it. So I can grab this. Note that I'm working on just one layer. This works per layer again. So I'll find the blue that I like here. And I know with color theory that my other color, just because of what I like, will probably live up in here for my midtone. So I go to my midtone, and I'll automatically just kind of start to head that way up and see where it lands. And it lands about here, according to my eye. So almost directly across from each other. Is there an error on my side? This is kind of a quick check for me. And then highlights. I don't tend to play with the highlights too much, but you could add a little bit of warmth there. And then the master is flat. So I can say the master, I want the whole image a little bit warmer. So I can adjust the hue by dragging this around. I can adjust the saturation by dragging it this way here. So now I have created, and I can hold down my Alt key and push this as a temporary reset. It's very unintuitive, but it's the way the product works. So that's my before and after. You can see that. I'm assuming you can. And I can say this is a preset then. So I can say this is a preset and say this is what I want to use. It's the one I prefer for this set or just in general. And then it'll save all the items that I changed that way for the color balance tool. So that's color balance. This is awesome right on its own. That is such a cool tool. Let's talk about, so there's a cool black and white tool. I don't really shoot a lot of black and white, but you people who do, this tool looks just like the one in Lightroom, so I'm not going to amaze you with it. The color editor, though, this is amazing. And this is the reason why people come to Capture One. So first of all, I can do just skin tone operations here. So I can pick her skin tone, and it will show me. So this is the saturation level of the skin tone. This pie shape is what is selected currently. If I need a little bit more purple, I can drag it this way. I've got my different handles. I can spin this whole thing. But I want to say, what am I looking at? If you click this button, everything that is... We got to find a better image to show this, by the way. Too many yellows in that one. I have a lot of yellow in this whole set, I think. Very blah day. I guess I use this one. So you pick your skin tone, and then you come down here and you say, just view the selected color. Yeah, these are bad demonstration. I need to find a different one. But the trouble is that I do a lot of body painting, and I don't want nudity to be on YouTube, so I'm trying my darndest not to click the wrong button. All right, so I'll just pick a picture here. So by picking her skin tone, I can work with just that down here. And there's a couple of cool things about it. First of all, the smoothness, like how much of her skin are we allowing to show versus, say, the floor. I don't want to accidentally pick up the floor. And I can narrow this scope. So you can see here where I'm starting to lose her lips, for example. So her skin list exists there, and this red brick must exist a little bit farther over. So I can play with this until I get her skin tone. You see I'm having a challenge because the skin tone is also the mortar color in the brickwork. But anyway, you get the idea. If this were a better picture for a demonstration, you'd understand completely what I'm talking about. Anyway, once we find our color range for that, we can then change like a smoothness. This is how blurry we allow. Like if there's a color that's close, you can kind of see it represented here by those little shadows. How much we allow the other color to seep into it. Now we can adjust the hue of that selected one. Now note the hue slider in Capture One does not go 180 degrees. We can't wing this color from a yellow all the way to a green. We get a very narrow window where we can adjust that hue, and that's by design. You can actually have layers in here too, so you can take it and then add to it and add to it and add to it. So you can eventually get it to green, but you're not typically wildly swinging things inside of here. This is meant for nuance. So I have her hue of her skin, or the saturation of her skin, and then the lightness of the skin. And this is good for newborn photographers, we have uniformity. So that is saying of all the areas that are of this skin color, if there's areas that are purple or yellow or just not quite the same, make them all uniform. And that starts to kind of flatten out the skin tone a bit so that we have a much more consistent hue across all the things we had selected already. So uniformity is pretty cool for skin tone. And again, saturation and lightness for the uniformity. We can also flip that. We have all kinds of controls for adjusting how this wedge, this pyramid or diamond-shaped wedge here works, or this triangle-shaped wedge. So you have this amazing editor inside of here for helping you get your skin the way you want to get your skin. Now you can do that over and over and over and over again inside the advanced editor. This is supposed to help you with skin tone, but realistically you can use this same editor here the same way. There's no reason to use that other than uniformity and some of those other tools I just showed for skin tone that don't exist in the advanced editor. And by the way, you don't have to use skin tone for skin tone. You can use any tone you'd like to use. It doesn't care. It'll still do uniformity against it. And then the basic editor, as I showed you already, very similar. We can adjust each of those colors and how we want them represented. So their hue, if we want to shift the hue of the purple, for example, it'll show you the color that you started with and the color you're ending with. You can say, just show me those areas in the image that are this color. For example, her lips in the brick, and then some of her skin, there isn't any yellow, or her dress is yellow. So from her dress, I can push the hue around a bit, make it a bit more gold, for example, increase the saturation of it, and then uncheck that box because it's kind of disturbing to look at that way. Yeah, it looks terrible. Great job. So resetting the tool is that button there. So that's the color editor. You can do so much with this that Lightroom hasn't even thought of yet. That this is the main reason most people change, aside from having a better demonstration image with a lot more colors in it, you get kind of the idea of what you can do with this tool, hopefully. That was a pretty terrible demonstration. Sorry for that. Okay, let's move on. The detail screen, again, you can put whatever you'd like to put on here. Your film grain, removing moire, spot removal tool, very similar to Lightroom. I think Lightroom's spot removal tool is better because you have a few more options. All those tools, by the way, are available up here, so we don't have to go digging through menus. They're all right in here, so I can do whatever I want to do. There's a couple of cool tools I haven't talked about because I don't have the panels on here. One is annotations. So you can draw annotations on the screen. So if you say, over here, I need to remove this box, I need to fix this item over here, I need to, fluff her hair, remove this spot, whatever, in Photoshop later, like I would circle the, let me just try it. I can circle this and say I need to, remove this from the image. And then when I process this and I bring it over to Photoshop, all the annotations go into a separate layer. So all my annotations are already in Photoshop when I arrive. So I don't have to annotate twice. And I can annotate here with my product manager without having to open Photoshop for each image. We just bam, 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 go from picture to picture and annotate. You can change the marker size. You can change the color of the annotation, its width and thickness and all that kind of stuff. And then whether you want just the annotations to be on or not, that's your option. There's a bunch of tools in here. I'm not gonna be I'm not gonna be insane and go through all of them, but a lot of them are the same as Lightroom for a lot of the things you're looking at. Here's your master adjustments panel. So all the built-in adjustments. If you were to buy style packs or create your own style packs, they're all listed here. I am not a person who uses a lot of presets. Each image kind of sings its own song to me, so I don't use a preset. I play with the image until I like it. And yeah, they all tend to look similar because I tend to like it that way, but that's what a style is, isn't it? Something that you like the look of. So my style just happens to look the same without a preset being used. The metadata is probably, and here's the annotations tool, you can see the colors. The metadata area is probably the weakest area of Capture One in my mind, only because it used to be a separate product. It still is a separate product called Media Pro. And Media Pro is only one of two tools that can write to the raw file or does write to the raw file of a camera, because a raw file is supposed to be read-only. But Media Pro writes to it, and it corrupted a bunch of images. This was about 4 or 5 years ago, and I got really frustrated and decided never to use it again. And so now there's a keywording tool inside of Capture One, so you don't have to use two products, which is smart on their side, obviously. I store all the type of photography that this shot is. I store the model, all that kind of stuff. So I know who's who, and it exports just like it would in Lightroom. However, I also have access to all this other metadata information. So this is so leaning on a column is this. It's going to go into the metadata. I don't put Haley, which is who this is, yet, because I'll show you another really awesome part of why I love Capture One in a moment. But this is your metadata. You can manage all your metadata from here. And again, you can say miss presets. I can load in all my copyright information and so on. You can search and filter. However, you can't create synonyms, which just drives me nuts. So she doesn't want to be known as Haley Grace. Perhaps I have to store her as Haley Grace in here because I can't use her real name because Haley Grace is her modeling name. In Lightroom, I use her real name and it exports her modeling name. That is awesome. Can't do that in here. You can still nest things, which works well, but in general, I find this interface to be a little clunkier to use than Lightroom. Lightroom is a better keywording tool at this time, but they haven't updated that tool in many, many years, and Capture One, as I said, just added this tool recently in the last couple of versions, so it's getting shinier every time. So, and I actually I'm a pretty loud user of the product, so I send them feature requests often, and hopefully someone will make it in. And if you have, but in general, I try and help the product understand what I wanted coming from Lightroom and where they could maybe help me get there quicker. Well, I didn't really talk about these tools up here. Whether you want to see the annotations, whether you want to see grid lines, your exposure warning, which we're all used to. This one's really interesting. I'll get to that one in a second. I actually have my focus one turned off. Set focus mask. This is a pretty cool tool, and I turned it off because it drives me a little backy. wacky. This shows you everything that's in focus. So if you're wondering if you got stuff in focus, you just turn that on, and you can look through and see if you got what you needed to get in focus or not. It'll show in green. So it's a quick and easy way to say, did you nail your focus or not? If I hit the wall, it would be really obvious that I missed. So focus mask, pretty cool, interesting tool. What else? Okay, so exposure warning. Let's talk about recipes, because recipes are really the thing that makes this product extra amazing. So each recipe is a different output, like you have in Lightroom, where you can have your social media version, your versions to go to different things. In here, they stack like this. So you can check the boxes for all of them and export each one wherever you'd like to. Each one has its own file or container. For example, when I export to my portfolio, it goes into my Dropbox, my portfolio folder in Dropbox, where if I export it for my client, it will go into the client's folder. And I'll talk about this in a moment, but they get their 8x12 printable if they purchase a certain size, and then a full-size printable goes into, again, another folder, and then I have my in-person sales version, which is smaller resolution, so I can quickly load that into enview.com, which is what I use for my in-person sales. I have one for Painter, which launches Corel Painter with the product, with whatever image is there. My entries for the International Print Competition, quick export throws it on the desktop, and then my ECO is for electronic copyright. If you don't know what that is, we need to talk, because copywriting your images is freakishly important. So let's talk about the recipe, because the recipe is again one of the really cool tools. And this could take, I could spend an hour just on this tool, but I'm not gonna, but I could. So you basically say, what do you want to export as a JPEG? You know, what do you want to export it as? PNG, TIFF, PSD file, it's all good. The quality that you want to push it out as, the resolution, the long edge, all that kind of stuff. And if you want to open it, and if you want to put it someplace specific, and then the folder, the output naming, this is just awesome. So in here, you have all these different pieces of information about the image, the tokens, and I can use them to formulate whatever name I would like to use for this. So my camera serial number, the aperture it was shot at, the color tag it is currently, if it's part of a collection, and collection name is one I use quite often, which is why I'll get to that in a minute, why I don't put the word Haley in all those, because I know these are all Haley. Who the creator is. Oftentimes if I'm shooting a product, inside of the metadata, I'll have whether it's the top or the side or the isometric, what view of it that I'm looking at, top down, if it's a silo or not, how I'm shooting it. I can make it so that when I export these, it names the file appropriate to what it's supposed to be, so I don't have to sit there and rename all of them. And it can put it into different folders, so I can, all my top downs for a specific product go all into the same folder, all under the product name exactly. So I mean, it can generate the entire tree of exported files for me all in one click, and it just works, and that's what's beautiful. So you have all, and some of these I'm like, why would you ever need that? Well, at some point somebody wanted it, so that's why it's there. Everything onto websites. I mean, it's got it all, and you can use those along with text to create whatever you'd like to. So you can see here, mine has _ social media _ and then the name of the file, the original file name. We'll talk about this in a second. So subname is just a placeholder for text or whatever you'd like to use. And under file name, my subname is social media. It stores it in the folder. Collection name in the collection, if we go back here, is going to be, actually for this one, it would be Haley. So I would pick Haley as my collection. Now I'm going to be looking, this is a folder like Lightroom, where it's set to only things that are keywords containing the word Haley. So it's a smart folder. So when I go to process this, it's going to put it in social media. It's going to put it in the folder Haley /shareable /social media /, and then it's going to put social media _ in the file name. So all the stuff for Haley, because I give all my models social media versions of their images, it just dumps it in there, and she already has Dropbox link capability to get to that folder. So I don't have to worry about distributing things to my models. I just have to remember to check this box, and bam, it's done. So I'm exporting my full-size printable, so that if I need it when I'm on the road at a convention or something, and Canon is printing images for people, which I love that they do that. I already have all my images with me here, and then my portfolio, which is a web size one for Facebook, Instagram, and so on. I also have Boudoir brand. Each one has a different watermark. So this is another thing that drives me absolutely batty about Lightroom, but they solved it here. If I grab my watermark tool, here it is. Bigger. I'll make it white just for example. You can store as many watermarks as you would like. So here's my watermark. So I can make it as big as I want, put it wherever I want to, and then export this bad boy, and it's done. It don't have to have a separate preset. This is the bottom corner, and it's the white one. It's at 8% opacity, and then I have another one for the right-hand side, upper corner, that's red or whatever. It's just drives me absolutely batty that they haven't done this. And this has been this way for a long time. So you get it exactly where you want it, and when you export, it'll add the watermark for you. And because I use two different brands, I could change the watermark each time, but I have this one set to export into a different folder because it puts it under a Boudoir root folder as well. So I don't mix it in with my regular portfolio. And you can see my my watermark up here is already set to the Knickers and Knees brand, which is my Boudoir brand. So the process recipes are pretty cool. You can do so much in here. And each one has different metadata, what you want to export, what you don't choose to export. If you want annotations in there, if you want to add the overlay in there, again, the naming. And then to export, to make these things happen, by the way, you also have access to all your meta here because I added that tool. Because I use my metadata as like variable storage for information about the image. And then when you want to export it, you just hit this big gear icon up here, or you can hit, there's, obviously keyboard shortcuts. And it'll process all the ones that are checked and go ahead and create those files and dump them where you wanted to dump them. This is a huge time saver. And then here's the batch engine. It shows your history of all the stuff you have exported, where you exported it, and so on. So it's pretty nice, and it's always there and available if you've got a huge stack of things going on. So you exported a product, and you've got 50 or 60 product in that folder, and you need to export each one. You go for it. Now, this is where I start my workflow actually as well. So I go up here to export to Photoshop as a TIFF. So it's going to rename this. It's going to put, well, it's duplicating the name here. Let me pick it up one. Pick one with none. So I would pick this one. It's just SED 9598 right now. If I go up and I want to export it, it's going to call it. So I would give it a brief. So she's standing near a window. And it will export her, trying to get to update here. It will export her folder as, or her file as Haley standing near window. It didn't update here, but that's what this will do. So it will have a new name, which is why if you see all my names on my files are a little long. You're probably like, why are his names all on, like this is Haley in gold dress on floor. Haley seated on stairs with white hair. So if I want a picture of Haley, I just search for the word Haley inside a Lightroom or Dropbox, or not Lightroom, my Explorer or Dropbox. I have all my pictures of Haley, and then I can say which one did I want. I don't even have to look at the picture to see, oh, it's the one of Haley in the stairs. I can search for Haley in the stairs. That's just how I do it. And to rename a file, you just click on it, and you can start editing it. So it's very easy to change the things that you might want to change if you don't like the name of it. So I put people into folders like this so that I keep track of them. Like if I have just abandoned shots, these are shots of areas inside the prison that I took pictures of for some weird reason. I can go ahead and just get to those abandoned ones. And when I export this, it's going to put the word abandoned. And then I would put hallway, for example. So it would export as abandoned hallway.tiff into Photoshop. And then when I save it, it's already named, and I'm done. I know what it is. I know where to find it, and I'm all good. So that's pretty much the majority of the goodies that are available here. I mean, I kind of roared right through them, but there's a lot to the tool. Oh, I was going to talk about this. So this little eyeglass thing here, this is a fairly recent addition to the product. So if I'm exporting, and this will happen to you, you're exporting something like, I wonder what that's going to look like. So I can click on this. Now this image is being shown to me at the resolution, sharpness, and all the other settings of the social media version that I'm requesting of it. So I do have sharpness set a bit for on screen for this. So I'm seeing exactly the folder or the file I'm going to get before having to export it and then open it up and look at it and going, that's not what I want. This allows you to see what you're going to get before you get there. So if I zoom in 100% and look at this thing, this is my social media version. Actually, I click on this and then click the sunglasses or click the glasses. You can see it, obviously the resolution has dropped significantly because the social media version isn't supposed to be very large. So this is pretty cool. It's just kind of seeing what your recipe is going to look like before you have to go and export it and then go look at it and see what it is. So if you have any questions, feel free to add them in the comments below the video, or you can add them in now and I'll hit them. Otherwise, I'll answer them. I'd like to keep the conversation here instead of so much on Facebook, because obviously a lot of people aren't in the Shutterfest group where this originated, and this video is available worldwide now, so it'll be up there for anybody else that wants to look at it. One of the other reasons I don't like Facebook Live, I much prefer this as a way to get information across to people. So are there any questions? If not, I think we're good to go. That was 1 hour and 1 minute. So that should cover it. Again, you can move everything around, adjust it, move it to your other monitor, change the way things are displayed. There's all kinds of different mechanisms for looking at things, just like there is in Lightroom. The two tools are not that dissimilar in their overall functionality, other than a few bells and whistles between each product. There are some things about the products I say that annoy me, but overall, it was well worth the change, and I'm happy I did it, and I really haven't gone back to Lightroom at all. So, all right, I think that's it. So if there's any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll answer them, and if I need to, I can do a follow-up video. But yeah, there's a learning curve to this. It is well worth the time and effort. Just take it slow and use the product, just like getting a Wacom tablet. I had a Wacom tablet for many years and just didn't force myself to use it. And when I finally committed to using it, I'm really glad I did. But for the longest time, I didn't do it. So kind of the same thing. You just got to start using it, and you'll get used to it and where it's going. But overall, very happy with the change. All right, okay, well, I'll catch you guys later.